This is Muhammad Hamouda speaking. Tech- Technical and Scientific Translation course. Actually, to start with the general introduction, this lecture is an introductory lecture, and we are going to highlight the main definitions and the main concepts and the principles of technical and scientific translation. To start with the definition of scientific translation, actually, in general, at the beginning of translation studies, not only scientific translation but all types or the general definition of translation at the very beginning of translation studies is seen as a replacement of vocabulary from the source text into the target text, or replacing the source text vocabulary into their target text, into their equivalent terms or equivalent vocabulary in the target text. This is the linguistic level of translation. However, this level or this definition is or failed to produce authentic translated text. Okay, to overcome this problem, we the definition or the definition of translation studies is wider than this. At as we look scientific translation, scientific is drawn from the word science. So it deals with, so we expected that this type of translation from its name to deal with scientific text, to deal with scientific texts, to deal with new inventions, new theories, new scientific theories, and new scientific concepts, and so on. Thus, the translator not only convey terms and vocabulary, but also he communicates technology. He communicates new inventions. The definition of scientific translation is not to transfer uh, vocabulary from the source text into the target text, but to transfer technology and the new scientific terms, new scientific inventions, and the new scientific concepts from the source text into the target text. So the simplest definition of scientific translation is not to replace source text vocabulary into the target text, but to replace or to transfer knowledge, scientific knowledge, to replace the new technologies, to transfer new inventions and new concepts from the source text into the target text. And this is the simplest definition and the clearest definition of scientific translation. Now, actually, the main problem in scientific translation is that it deals with scientific terms, and these scientific terms may do not may not existed eh, may not exist in the target text. For example, at the beginning of the invention of mobile phone, actually mobile phone as a device, as a technical device does not exist in Arabic language. So how can we deal as translators in rendering this device? So the absence or the main problem is that the scientific translation usually are new inventions and new discoveries and new concepts and new theories which are not found in the in the target text or in the target language. Thus, the equivalent terms are not found as well. So, to determine or to shape the clearest definition or the clearest term that reflects the device or reflects the theory or reflects the concept is very important issue, yet it is very difficult and it is a main problem faced by the scientific translators. Okay, now the definition. of scientific translation. Actually, scientific translation is mainly about translating terms in the fields of science and terms of all kinds medicine, physics, chemistry, mathematics, and so on. This is the definition of Ghazala. Actually, as I said before, or as I said in the previous slide, that scientific translation means to transfer new discoveries, new concepts, new technologies that are found in medical or physical or chemical or mathematical texts from one language or from the source language into the target language. Okay, now so, actually, scientific translation also does not or do not involve literary text, and there is a distinction between, we should distinguish between literary text and scientific texts. Usually, scientific texts are texts that deal with new inventions, new concepts, scientific concepts, new machines, and so on. Usually, they are literary texts, they are medical, law, economic, engineering, chemical, or computer scientific texts, and so on. While literary texts are characterized with the extensive use of figurative language. Scientific texts usually include a lot of figures of speech, such as alliteration, such as metaphors, similes, and so on. So, these texts are usually include a lot of figurative language or figures of speech, while scientific texts usually are linked with logic, logical explanation, and logical explanation of natural phenomena. For example, if the text is physical text, it deals with the explanation of natural phynomena. So it is a logical explanation. It is reasonable. It introduces the text highlights the main causes and the main effects of a natural, for example, a natural phenomena, unlike the literary texts, which deals with emotions and deals with figurative language. Also, scientific translation is considered one of the most difficult translation types of translation. Why? As I said before, because this type of translation include because this type of translation deals with a new vocabulary, new inventions, or new technical terms, new technological terms, which do not have equivalent terms into the target language because they are originally new in their source language. What about the target language? Also, they lack the lack of equivalent terms. This is the main problem that constitutes the main difficulty in scientific translation. Actually, NIDA highlights this point, comparing between shedding the lights on the translation from the developed countries or the Western countries into the translation from developed countries languages into the third world languages, because developed countries usually are characterized with scientific discoveries, scientific theories, putting in new scientific theories and the new technological devices, while the world countries lacks this or lack this technological abilities to produce or to invent new inventions or to discover new discoveries. So the lack of equivalent is the main problem that facing scientific translators in general. Now, what about the definition of technical translation? Actually, scientific translation and technical translation are similar to each other, but there is a slight difference between them. First of all, we highlight the definition of scientific translation as transferring technological inventions and communicating technology from the source language into the target language. Now, scientific translation usually deals with scientific texts such as medicine, such as physics, chemistry, computer sciences, and so on. While technical translation also actually it comprises the translation of special language terms, text written using languages for special purposes. It means technical translation is similar to specialized translation because it deals with texts that the translation of texts that written for a special purpose or for conveying or fulfilling a special purpose. So, technical translation or technical terminology as another name to technical translation includes not only the translation of engineering or medical texts but also the translation of economical text or psychological text and or law text in law. So any text that is written for a special purpose, this it is technical translation. Okay, so it is synonymous to specialized translation as I said, or as Newmark highlights in his book in 1998. Actually, the main difference between scientific translation and technical translation is that the language or the scientific translation is concept centered, while technical translation is object centered. What is meant by concept centered and what is meant by object centered? Actually, concept centered means that scientific explanation, usually science or scientific language deals with a new invention, deals with new discoveries and new theories. So these theories and these discoveries usually are not touched, they are abstract things. So these are concept based or concept centered. While in technology or technical translation, technology deals with the inventions of a new the inventions of new technological devices. These technological devices can be touched, so they are object. So not abstract things, but they are object centered or object based. Can so scientific translations deals with concepts, while technical translation deals with objects. Scientific translation concepts, while technical translation deals with objects. Now, uh, also, scientific translation relates to pure science. I mean the theoretical explanations, for example, theoretical explanations, concepts, theories, and so on. While the application of these theories and putting these theories to practical use is is technical translation. So we have the translation of the theory or the new theory it is scientific translation, but the translation of the applications of these theories is, or this new theory is technical translation. So actually they are related to each other a lot. They both of them are related to new or deals with, or both of them are related or deal with in new inventions, new discoveries, but one with theoretical issues. The second one, or the technical translation, is the application of these theoretical issues and putting these theoretical issues to practical use. Now, uh, actually, as we said, there are slight differences between scientific translation and technical translation regarding the subject matter, regarding the purpose or the language. But both of them, or both these two types of translation, take the same techniques and the same translation strategies, as we are going to see next lecture, inshallah. Okay, now what are the requirements of a scientific translator? Actually, we said scientific translators usually do not deal with texts that are known or ordinary texts, but also they deal with texts that include new inventions, and new thoughts, and new discoveries, and new inventions, and so on. So it is not it is not transferring of items or transferring of vocabulary, but they are transferring knowledge and new informations or ideas. So, scientific translators usually should be knowledgeable, know or understand the new theory well, should have enough knowledge. They must have enough knowledge about the new invention or about the new discovery before translating it into the target text. So the main requirement of the scientific translator is to be knowledgeable of uh, the new invention or the new discovery. Actually, we have nine requirements for the scientific translator, but the main requirement is the requirement number 4, which is understanding of sciences. Scientific translators must understand the scientific explanations and scientific discoveries and scientific discoveries, I mean, or scientific theories before in their source language before translating it into the target language. Another requirement is that their work should be suitable for publication, dealing with texts that are acceptable in the target culture. For example, we have several inventions which are not acceptable or religiously unacceptable in the target culture. So, how can we translate this text into the target language? Actually, they will not these texts will not be preceded or accepted by the target audience. Okay, actually, also another requirement is respect to references. Actually, we have these new inventions usually are inventions of certain people, certain scientists, and we should respect them, and we must refer to them as the main source, or as the main sources of these inventions. Even in the target language, even in the target text, translators should refer that this theory is written or is in this device is invented by a certain scholar, for example, a specific scholar, and so on, as as a source of authenticity, as a form of authenticity. We should refer to the ones who invent these theories or these new discoveries. Okay, actually, scientific context versus literary context. We have these are the main differences between scientific texts and literary texts. As we said, scientific texts usually deal with are logical texts. How? Because we have, for example, in physics, we have a natural phenomena, or we have a natural phenomenon. This phenomenon, scientists usually investigate the occurrences of these phenomena, these natural phenomenon, or the reasons for the occurrences of this natural phenomenon, or the causes of it, and so on. So usually we have logical explanation of a certain scientific item or a certain scientific issue, while literary, and also we have argumentative form. We have the ones who support this issue, we have the ones who uh, do not support these issues. While in literary texts, we have a lack of argumentative progression. We do not have argumentative. Also, about the reason, also we usually scientific texts usually high the reason is very important. It is very important to mention or to investigate the reasons of phenomena a certain phenomenon, for example, or detailed explanation, or introducing a detailed explanation of a certain theory, for example. While literary text usually deals with emotions and deals with feelings, either the feelings of the author, or the feelings of, or usually authors or poets invite their audience or their readers to share the same feelings, share them, share same feelings with them, unlike the scientific texts, which are logical and reasonable. Regarding also, we have figurative or language. Usually, scientific text usually lacks the use of figures of speech, while literary texts we have so many figures of speech. Speech usually used in literary texts, such as alliteration, assonance, simile, metaphor, and so on and so forth. Also, the idiomatic expressions. Usually, scientific texts, the language is very clear, the items are clear and have only one meaning. The items used in scientific texts usually have one meaning, one clear meaning, which so we are dealing with denotative meaning or referential meaning in scientific text, while in literary text we deals with emotive meanings or connotations. Why? Because the same sentence or the same expression, for example, used in literary texts, may have two levels of meanings. The first level, which is apparent, and the second one is implied meaning. For example, so we have apparent meaning and we have implied meaning. For example, as Ahmad Shaw, as Ibrahim Tuqan said, فما بال شوقي اليوم أصبح باردا. فما بال شوقي اليوم أصبح باردا. Look at شوقي. Actually it has this word or this expression or this item has two different meanings. The first one is من الشوق واللوعة. شوقي من الشوق واللوعة. And this is the apparent one. هذا المعنى الظاهر والواضح. While the implied meaning or المعنى الخفي it is أحمد شوقي. يعني هو قصده أحمد شوقي. So in literary text we deal with two levels of meanings, the apparent level or the apparent meaning and the implied meaning. While in scientific text we are dealing only with one level of meaning, which is the apparent or the denotative or referential meaning. Okay, regarding the idiomatic expressions, they are very rare in scientific texts, while literary texts impossible. It is impossible to not find to not find any idiomatic expression in a certain text. In every text, you can find several idiomatic expressions. Scientific text also deals with acronyms, abbreviations, registers, and so on, while literary texts do not use abbreviations or acronyms. Also, it uses scientific texts usually use standard language, while literary texts usually include all language varieties. It may be standard language, it may be colloquial language, or even in the same novel, for example, which is a literary text, you can see or you can notice the use of several types of language or several varieties, such as the standard language, the colloquial language, and so on. Okay, these are the main differences between scientific texts and literary texts. Now, actually, definition of scientific terminology, no need to these texts. Now, this is the end of this chapter. Next lecture, we are going to talk about the definitions of terminology, what is meant by terminology, and scientific terminology in particular. We are going to investigate the main strategies of translation in technical and scientific from Arabic and from English into Arabic, and so on. Please, if you have any question, feel free to ask me whatever you want. Thank you very much.